Rain hammered the glass towers of Seoul like bullets against steel. In the heart of the city's darkness stood a man the entire underworld feared, Cairo Jin, the untouchable king who turned souls into ash with a single glance. But tonight, inside a glittering Gangnam penthouse flooded with champagne and lies, he met the only woman who refused to bow. Her name was Zaria Vale, a black fashion designer with fire in her eyes and ice in her voice. When Cairo asked if she knew who he was, she looked him dead in the face and said, "Should I?" That single question ignited an obsession that would burn Seoul to the ground. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The rain started at midnight. It always did in Seoul when something terrible was about to happen. Fat drops hammered the neon-soaked streets, while black sedans carved through traffic like sharks through blood. Inside the lead vehicle, Cairo Jin sat perfectly still, his eyes reflecting the city lights streaming past the tinted windows. He looked like money. Expensive black suit tailored so precisely it might as well have been sewn onto his body. Dark hair slicked back with the kind of precision that suggested violence lived just beneath the surface. Hands resting on his knees, hands that had broken bones, signed death warrants, and counted more blood money than most men would see in 10 lifetimes. But it was his eyes that made people freeze. Cold, empty, calculating. The eyes of a man who had stopped being human somewhere along the way. "Boss," the driver's voice cracked through the silence. "We're 3 minutes out." Cairo didn't respond. He never wasted words on confirmation. The driver knew better than to expect one. Outside, Seoul glittered like a broken promise. Skyscrapers punched holes in the storm clouds while streets below crawled with people who had no idea the entire city existed at his mercy. Politicians who owed him favors. Businessmen who paid protection. Cops who looked the other way when bodies turned up in the Han River. This was his kingdom. And tonight, like every night, he would remind them exactly who ruled it. The convoy rolled to a stop outside the Vesper Club, a members-only penthouse lounge perched on the 68th floor of the Gangnam Meridian Tower. The kind of place where Korea's elite pretended they weren't doing business with criminals while doing exactly that. Cairo stepped from the sedan into the rain. He didn't rush, didn't flinch when water soaked his shoulders. 2 bodyguards flanked him immediately, muscular men in dark suits with earpieces and dead expressions. The lobby receptionist went pale when she saw him. "Mr. Jin." She bowed so low her forehead nearly touched the marble desk. "They're waiting for you upstairs." Cairo walked past her without acknowledgement. The private elevator rose in silence. His reflection stared back from the polished steel doors, a ghost of a man wrapped in expensive fabric and casual menace. Somewhere between the 40th and 50th floors, one of his bodyguards cleared his throat. "Sir, your uncle called again. He wants—" "I know what he wants." The bodyguard shut up immediately. Cairo's uncle, Dae-hyun Jin, was a relic. An old-world gangster who believed blood meant loyalty and tradition meant survival. He'd been calling for weeks, demanding Cairo settle down with some carefully selected Korean heiress to secure alliances and produce heirs. As if Cairo gave a single fuck about legacy. Power was the only thing that mattered. Everything else, love, family, honor, was just theater for weak men. The elevator opened directly into the Vesper Club. Music pulsed through the space, something electronic and expensive. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across a crowd dressed in designer labels and fake smiles. Champagne flowed like water. Beautiful women draped themselves over leather couches while men in tailored suits conducted business disguised as conversation. The moment Cairo stepped inside, the room changed. Conversations died mid-sentence, laughter choked off. Every head turned toward him like flowers following the sun, except these flowers knew the sun could burn them alive. Cairo moved through the crowd without speaking. People parted for him instinctively, creating a corridor of empty space. A few brave souls bowed. Most just stared at their drinks and prayed he wasn't here for them. At the far end of the room, beneath a chandelier that probably cost more than most people's houses, stood a small group of Seoul's wealthiest criminals. Men who ran construction empires, shipping conglomerates, and pharmaceutical companies, all of them fronts for money laundering, drug trafficking, and human smuggling. They straightened when Cairo approached. "Gentlemen," His voice was smooth, controlled, lethal. Mr. Jin, the oldest one, a silver-haired man named Park, bowed slightly. We were just discussing the shipment issue you mentioned. And? Park swallowed. We've identified the leak. One of the dock supervisors was feeding information to a rival syndicate. Was? He won't be a problem anymore. Cairo nodded once. Good. What about the politician? Another man stepped forward, younger, sweating despite the air conditioning. Senator Choi is reluctant. He's worried about public perception if he pushes the zoning law through. Worried. The word hung in the air like a noose. Tell Senator Choi, Cairo said quietly, that his daughter attends university in London. Lovely girl, studies art history. It would be unfortunate if something happened to her. The younger man went pale. I'll relay the message. See that you do. Cairo turned away from them, dismissing the entire conversation. Business concluded. Threats delivered. Fear distributed. Just another night. He moved toward the bar, his bodyguards trailing behind like shadows. The bartender, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, immediately poured as usual. Single malt whiskey, neat, expensive enough to be an insult to anyone who couldn't afford it. Cairo lifted the glass. That's when he saw her. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, and she was different. Not dressed like the other women here. No skin-tight dress or designer heels. Instead, she wore a simple black jumpsuit with clean lines and subtle elegance. Her skin was dark, her hair natural and beautifully textured. Her posture relaxed in a way that suggested she didn't give a damn about impressing anyone. And she was looking directly at him, not with fear, not with interest, just looking. Like he was a stranger, a nobody. Something unfamiliar twisted in Cairo's chest. He set down his drink and walked toward her. The crowd parted again. Whispers followed him like smoke. Everyone watched to see what would happen when the King of Seoul approached the woman who didn't know or didn't care who he was. Cairo stopped 3 feet away from her. Up close, she was even more striking. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that held intelligence and something else. Something that looked dangerously close to indifference. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled. The same tone that made grown men confess their sins. The woman lifted her champagne glass slowly, took a sip, and met his gaze without flinching. "Should I?" The room went silent. Somewhere behind Cairo, someone gasped. His bodyguards tensed, ready to drag this woman out by her hair if he gave the signal. But Cairo didn't move. He just stared at her, feeling something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen solid for as long as he could remember. Not anger. Fascination. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zaria Vale." "You're not from here." "No." She gestured at the crowd with her glass. "I design clothes. One of my clients invited me." Clothes. Fashion. She corrected him with the faintest hint of amusement. "There's a difference." Cairo studied her face. Most women who spoke to him either trembled or threw themselves at him. Fear or lust. Those were the only reactions he ever got. But this woman, Zaria, she looked at him like he was just another man in an expensive suit. Like he was ordinary. "You should be careful," Cairo said quietly. "Seoul can be dangerous for someone who doesn't understand how things work here." Zaria's eyes narrowed slightly. "And how do things work here?" "Men like me own this city, everything in it. Everyone." "Everyone?" "Everyone." She smiled then, a small, devastating curve of her lips that somehow felt like a slap. "I don't think you own anything that matters," she said. Then she turned and walked away. Just like that. Mid-conversation. As if Cairo Jin, the man who controlled half of South Korea's criminal empire, wasn't worth another second of her time. His bodyguard stared after her in shock. Cairo stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it hadn't in years. No one walked away from him. No one dismissed him. No one treated him like he was invisible. "Boss?" One of his guards stepped closer. "Should we find out everything about her?" The guard blinked. "Sir?" "Everything. Where she lives, where she works, who she knows. I want a full report by morning." "Yes, sir." Cairo watched Zaria disappear into the crowd. her silhouette swallowed by the sea of people who would never dare speak to him the way she just had. And for the first time in his life, the King of Soul felt something dangerous stirring inside him. Not power, not control, obsession. The rain stopped just before dawn. Cairo stood in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River, still wearing last night's suit, whiskey glass dangling from his fingers. He hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. Behind him, his bodyguard cleared his throat. "We have the information you requested, sir." Cairo turned. "Tell me." The guard consulted a tablet. Zaria Vale, 28 years old, American, originally from New York, moved to Seoul 8 months ago. She runs a small fashion studio in Itaewon, custom designs, high-end clients, no criminal record, no debts, no political connections. Family? Parents deceased, no siblings. She lives alone in an apartment above her studio. Who invited her to the Vesper Club? Mrs. Yoon, wife of the textile manufacturer. Apparently she commissioned a dress for Miss Vale and was impressed enough to bring her along. Cairo processed this. A designer, an outsider. Someone with no ties to Seoul's power structures. Someone who had no reason to fear him because she didn't know what he was capable of. Where is she now? The guard checked his watch. Her studio opens at 9. She should be there within the hour. Cairo drained his whiskey, set the glass down, made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the car, Pochikit. Itaewon was Seoul's international district, a neighborhood where foreigners, artists, and misfits carved out space away from the city's rigid hierarchy. The streets smelled like coffee, street food, and ambition. Small boutiques crowded between bars and restaurants, their windows displaying everything from vintage records to handmade jewelry. Zaria's studio sat on a quiet corner, wedged between a vinyl shop and a specialty tea store. The sign above the door read Valet Atelier in simple lettering. Cairo's sedan pulled up across the street. He didn't get out immediately, just watched through the tinted window as Zaria unlocked her studio door and disappeared inside. Lights flickered on. Shadows moved behind the glass. She had no idea he was there. "Sir?" The driver glanced back. Do you want us to—" "Wait here." Cairo stepped out alone. The morning air was crisp, scrubbed clean by last night's rain. He crossed the street and stood outside Zaria's studio, studying the window display. Elegant dresses hung on minimalist mannequins, designs that somehow managed to be both modern and timeless. He pushed open the door. A small bell chimed. Inside, the studio was warm and lived in. Fabric swatches covered one wall. A vintage sewing machine sat on a wooden table surrounded by scattered sketches. Jazz played softly from a speaker somewhere. And there, standing with her back to him, was Zaria. She wore paint-stained jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair pulled back as she pinned fabric to a dress form. She didn't turn around. "We're not open yet," she said without looking. "I'm not here to shop." She froze. Slowly, Zaria turned around. When she saw Cairo standing in her studio, 6 feet of controlled menace wrapped in a $1,000 suit, something flashed across her face. Not fear exactly, more like resignation. "You followed me." "I wanted to talk." "About what?" Cairo closed the door behind him. The bell chimed again, softer this time, like a warning. "About last night," he said. "About the way you spoke to me." Zaria set down her pins and crossed her arms. "Was I supposed to bow? Apologize?" "Most people would. I'm not most people." I noticed. They stared at each other across the small studio. Outside, Seoul woke up. Cars honking, people rushing to work, the city grinding forward like it did every day. But inside this space, time seemed to slow. Cairo took a step closer. "Do you have any idea what I could do to you?" he asked quietly. Zaria didn't retreat. "Probably a lot of terrible things. Men like you usually can. Men like me. Powerful, dangerous, used to getting what they want. And you're not afraid? Should I be?" There it was again, that question, the same one she'd asked last night, thrown back at him like a mirror reflecting something he didn't want to see. Cairo felt his control slipping, that carefully maintained wall between himself and everything human. "Why did you come to Seoul?" he asked instead. Zaria tilted her head slightly. "Why does anyone move to a new city? Fresh start, new opportunities. Escape from whatever they left behind. What did you leave behind? Nothing you need to know about. Fair enough. He had secrets too, entire graveyards of them. I want to take you to dinner, Cairo said. Zarya laughed, a genuine sound that caught him off guard. No. No? No. She turned back to her dress form, dismissing him again. I don't date clients, and I especially don't date men who show up at my studio uninvited because their ego got bruised. Cairo's jaw tightened. This isn't about ego. Then what is it about? I don't know. The honesty surprised them both. Zarya looked at him over her shoulder, her expression softening just slightly. Look, Mr. Jin, Cairo. Cairo. She said his name carefully, like she was testing how it felt. I'm sure you're used to women falling at your feet, and maybe that works for you, but I'm not interested in being another trophy in whatever collection you're building. You think that's what this is? Isn't it? Cairo stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something warm and subtle, like vanilla and wood smoke. I think, he said quietly, that you're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me like I'm just a man. Zarya met his eyes, held them, and for a moment something passed between them, something electric and dangerous and impossibly fragile. Then she stepped back. I have work to do, she said, her voice gentle but firm. You should go. Cairo knew dismissal when he heard it, but he also knew obsession when he felt it. And this, whatever this was, it wasn't finished. I'll be back, he said. Zarya smiled sadly. I figured you would. Cairo left the studio without another word. Outside, his driver immediately straightened. Sir, send flowers. What kind? Expensive ones. The flowers arrived that afternoon. 3 dozen black roses, rare, exotic, probably flown in from somewhere ridiculous. They came in a crystal vase with a card that read simply, K. Zarya donated them to a hospital. The next day, more flowers arrived. Then jewelry. Then an invitation to a private rooftop dinner at Seoul's most exclusive restaurant. Zarya ignored all of it. On the 3rd day, Cairo sent 2 of his bodyguards to escort her to lunch. They returned an hour later with black eyes and bruised egos. She hit us, one of them admitted, holding ice to his swollen jaw. Cairo sat behind his desk in his private office, fingers steepled, trying not to smile. And? She said to tell you she's nobody's possession. This time, Cairo did smile. Most women would have been terrified, would have accepted the gifts out of fear if nothing else. But Zarya kept pushing back, kept refusing, kept treating him like he was just another man trying too hard. And it was driving him insane. His phone buzzed, a text from his uncle. We need to talk, tonight. It's important. Cairo deleted it. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He drove to Itaewon alone. No bodyguards, no driver. Just him and the Seoul streets stretching out like arteries feeding a diseased heart. He parked across from Zarya's studio. And he waited. Evening fell. The city lights blinked on one by one. People streamed past. Students, tourists, lovers holding hands. Normal people living normal lives they'd never appreciate because they didn't know what it was like to have everything and feel nothing. Inside the studio, Zarya worked. Cairo watched her move around the space through the window. She was graceful, focused, completely absorbed in whatever she was creating. There was something almost meditative about the way she worked. Like the rest of the world disappeared when she had fabric in her hands. Around midnight, she finally stopped. Zarya stretched, turned off the lights, and locked up. She walked down the quiet street alone, her bag slung over one shoulder. Cairo got out of his car and followed. He kept his distance, stayed in the shadows, watched as she bought street food from a vendor, laughed at something the old woman said, then continued toward her apartment. She lived above the studio, a small space with plants on the fire escape and warm light spilling through sheer curtains. Cairo stood on the street below, staring up at her window like some lovesick fool. What the hell was wrong with him? He'd built an empire on fear and violence. He'd killed men who disrespected him. He'd destroyed businesses, ruined families, and never lost a single night's sleep over it. But this woman, This stubborn, brilliant, infuriating woman, she was unraveling him with nothing but indifference. His phone buzzed again. Another text from his uncle. Tomorrow, no excuses. Cairo pocketed his phone without responding. Above him, Zaria's light went out. He stood there for another 10 minutes, feeling like an idiot, feeling like a stranger to himself. Then he drove home through the neon-soaked streets, his mind full of a woman who refused to be conquered. Check. The meeting with his uncle happened in a private room at a traditional Korean restaurant buried deep in Gangnam. The kind of place that didn't advertise, didn't take reservations, and only served people who moved in Seoul's shadows. Dae-hyun-jin sat at the head of the table, flanked by two of his most trusted advisors. He was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, dressed in an expensive suit that somehow looked old-fashioned on him. "You've been avoiding me," Dae-hyun said when Cairo entered. "I've been busy." "Too busy for family?" Cairo sat down across from him. "What do you want, uncle?" Dae-hyun poured tea with deliberate slowness, a power move disguised as courtesy. "I want to discuss your future. Our future." "There's nothing to discuss." "There's everything to discuss." Dae-hyun set down the teapot. "You're 34 years old, unmarried, no children, no heir. Our family's legacy depends on you, and you're acting like a playboy with no responsibilities." Cairo's expression didn't change. "I have responsibilities. I run this empire. You run half of it. I run the other half. And when I'm gone, everything falls on your shoulders." Dae-hyun leaned forward. "Which is why you need to marry. Soon. I've already arranged meetings with 3 suitable candidates, daughters of our allied families, good bloodlines, proper education, women who understand our world." "No." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Dae-hyun's eyes narrowed. "No? I'm not interested in arranged marriages. This isn't about interest. It's about duty, about preserving what we've built." Cairo stood up. "I didn't ask to be born into this family, uncle. I didn't ask to inherit your empire. But I've run it better than you ever did, and I'll continue running it my way." "Your way?" Dae-hyun's voice turned cold. "Is that why you've been chasing after some foreign woman? Some designer?" Cairo went very still. "How did you... You think I don't have eyes everywhere?" Dae-hyun stood as well, anger radiating off him. "You think I don't know about the flowers, the gifts, the bodyguards you sent? You're making yourself look weak, Cairo. Desperate. And weak leaders don't survive in our world." "She has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with this." Dae-hyun slammed his hand on the table. "You're obsessed with a woman who doesn't belong in our world. A foreigner with no connections, no family, no value to our empire. She's a distraction, a liability." Cairo's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "Watch how you speak about her." Dae-hyun stared at his nephew, and something like fear flickered across his face before anger swallowed it again. "If you won't listen to reason," Dae-hyun said slowly, "then I'll make the decision for you. You will marry one of the candidates I've selected, and you will end whatever foolishness you've started with this woman. Or what? Or I'll end it for you." The threat hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Cairo walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. "If you touch her," he said quietly, "I will destroy you. Family or not, uncle or not. I will bury you so deep they'll never find the pieces." He left without waiting for a response. Outside, his driver opened the car door immediately. Cairo slid into the back seat, his mind racing. His uncle wasn't bluffing. Dae-hyun-jin didn't make empty threats, which meant Zaria was in danger. "Drive to Itaewon," Cairo ordered. "Sir?" "Now." The car peeled away from the restaurant, racing through Seoul's midnight streets. Cairo pulled out his phone and called his head of security. "I need a protection detail," he said when the man answered. "Full surveillance, 24 hours. The target is Zaria Vale, American woman, fashion designer, lives in Itaewon. I want people watching her studio and her apartment. If anyone approaches her, I want to know immediately." "Understood, sir. Threat level?" "Critical." He hung up and stared out the window as the city blurred past. His uncle was right about one thing. Zaria was a distraction. But she was also the only thing in Cairo's life that felt real. And he'd burned down the entire empire before letting anyone hurt her. "Yes." Zarya was locking up her studio when she noticed them. Two men standing across the street, trying to look casual and failing. Another one near the tea shop, pretending to check his phone. Bodyguards. She recognized the type. Expensive suits, earpieces, that particular way of standing that said military training. She locked the door and walked directly toward the nearest one. "You work for Cairo Jin," she said, not a question. The bodyguard blinked, clearly not expecting to be confronted. "Ma'am, Tell him I don't need protection." "I can't do that, ma'am." "Then I will." Zarya pulled out her phone and called the only number Cairo had managed to get to her, left on the back of one of his ridiculous gift cards. He answered on the first ring. "Zarya." His voice sent an unwanted shiver down her spine. "Call off your dogs," she said. "I can't do that." "Why not?" Silence. Then, "Because you're in danger." "From who?" "From people who want to hurt me by hurting you." Zarya stopped walking. The street around her continued its evening routine, people heading home, restaurants filling up, the city humming with life. "I never asked for this," she said quietly. "I know. I don't want any part of your world. I know that too." "Then why won't you leave me alone?" Another silence. Longer this time. When Cairo spoke again, his voice was raw in a way she hadn't heard before. "Because I can't." Zarya closed her eyes. This was insane. She'd come to Seoul to escape complications, to build something simple and beautiful, and hers. Instead, she'd somehow caught the attention of the most dangerous man in the city. "I didn't ask for you to care about me," she said. "You think I wanted this?" Cairo's laugh was bitter. "You think I wanted to feel anything? I've spent 10 years building walls, Zarya, and you walked through them like they were made of paper." "That's not my fault." "I know, but it's still true." Zarya opened her eyes and looked at the bodyguards, pretending not to watch her. "How long?" she asked. "How long what?" "How long until your world stops being dangerous?" "It never stops." "Then this is impossible." "Probably." "So what do we do?" Cairo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something that sounded dangerously close to vulnerability. "Have dinner with me. One meal. That's all I'm asking." "And then?" "And then, I don't know. But at least we'll have tried." Zarya shouldn't say yes. Every logical part of her brain screamed that getting involved with Cairo Jin was suicide. But there was something in his voice, something broken and honest and desperate, that made her hesitate. "One dinner," she said finally. "One dinner. And if I hate it, you leave me alone. No more flowers, no more bodyguards, no more following me around like a ghost. I promise." Zarya knew better than to trust promises from dangerous men, but she said yes anyway. The dinner was set for the following evening at a private rooftop restaurant overlooking the Han River. Zarya spent the entire day questioning her sanity. She tried on 7 different outfits before settling on a simple black dress she'd designed herself, elegant but not trying too hard. She told herself this wasn't a date. This was closure. A chance to tell Cairo Jin to his face that whatever he thought was happening between them couldn't happen. The restaurant was exactly what she expected. Exclusive, expensive, and empty except for them. Cairo stood when she arrived, looking devastating in a dark suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His eyes tracked her movement across the rooftop, like she was the only thing in the world worth watching. "You came," he said. "I keep my promises." They sat across from each other at a table set with crystal and candlelight. Seoul spread out beneath them, a galaxy of light stretching to the horizon. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Zarya broke the silence. "Tell me something real," she said. Cairo looked up from his wine. "What do you want to know?" "Why do you do it? The violence, the fear. What's the point of building an empire if it just makes you miserable?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at her like he was trying to decide if honesty was worth the risk. Finally, he spoke. "My father was weak," Cairo said quietly. "He believed in honor, in loyalty, in doing the right thing, and those beliefs got him killed when I was 17. Zarya leaned forward slightly. His enemies tortured him for 3 days before putting a bullet in his head, Cairo continued. They left his body in the street like garbage. And while he was dying, you know what I learned? What? That power is the only thing that matters. Not love, not family, not honor, just power. His eyes met hers. So I became powerful. More powerful than anyone could touch. I built an empire on fear because fear keeps you alive. And does it? Zarya asked softly. Keep you alive? I'm still breathing. That's not the same thing. Cairo's jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? That I regret it? That I wish I'd chosen a different path? I want you to be honest. I am being honest. I'm a monster, Zarya. I've done terrible things to terrible people, and I do them again because that's what survival looks like in my world. Then why are you here? She asked. Why chase after someone like me if you're so committed to being a monster? Cairo stood up abruptly and walked to the edge of the rooftop. Zarya followed. They stood side by side, looking out over the city, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. Because when I'm near you, Cairo said quietly, I remember what it felt like to be human. The words hit her like a physical blow. Zarya turned to face him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not the cold, calculating predator from the nightclub, not the dangerous criminal who ruled Seoul's underworld. Just a man. Broken. Lost. Desperate for something he didn't know how to name. Cairo? He kissed her. Not gently, not asking permission. He kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, his hands cupping her face, his body pressed against hers. For one suspended moment, Zarya forgot every logical reason this was a terrible idea. She forgot the bodyguards and the threats, and the empire built on blood. She just felt. Then reality crashed back. Zarya pulled away, her heart hammering, her mind screaming warnings. This can't happen, she whispered. Why not? Because you're dangerous. Because your world is violent. Because I came to Seoul to build something beautiful, and you're offering me chaos. Maybe you need chaos. Maybe I need to survive. Cairo stepped back, his expression shuddering closed again, the monster sliding back into place like armor. I should take you home, he said. They drove through Seoul in silence. When the car pulled up outside her studio, Zarya hesitated before opening the door. Thank you for dinner, she said. Zarya. She looked back. Cairo's eyes held hers in the dim light of the car's interior. I meant what I said. If you want me gone, I'll disappear. But if you change your mind... He trailed off. You know where to find me. Zarya nodded and stepped out into the night. She didn't look back as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, she locked the door, leaned against it, and tried to catch her breath. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We know about the dinner. We know about the kiss. Stay away from Cairo Jin, or you'll regret it. Zarya's blood went cold. Before she could respond, her apartment's lights went out. All of them, at once. She heard footsteps in the hallway outside her door, and then someone knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that sounded like a death sentence. Zarya didn't move. The 3 knocks echoed through her dark apartment like gunshots. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her throat. The phone was still clutched in her hand, the threatening text glowing on the screen. Outside her door, floorboards creaked. Someone was waiting. Zarya's eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting shadows across her living room. She could see the outline of her couch, her small kitchen table, the sewing machine she'd left out. Another knock, harder this time. Then a voice, low, male, speaking Korean with a rough edge. Miss Vale, open the door. Not a request, a command. Zarya's mind raced. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor. No fire escape. One window that led to a 7-foot drop onto the street. The door in front of her was the only way in or out. She backed away slowly, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The doorknob rattled. Someone was testing it, checking if she'd been stupid enough to leave it unlocked. The deadbolt held. For now. Zarya grabbed her phone and did the one thing she'd sworn she wouldn't do. She called Cairo. He answered before the first ring finished. Zarya? Someone's outside my apartment. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. They sent me a text. They said, lock yourself in the bathroom, now. Cairo? Do it. I'm 3 minutes away. The line went dead. Zarya ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and wedged herself between the toilet and the wall. Her hands were shaking. The phone slipped in her sweaty grip. Outside, she heard the apartment door splinter. Wood cracking, metal tearing, the deadbolt ripping free from the frame. Footsteps entered her home, heavy boots, multiple sets, at least 3 people, maybe more. They weren't trying to be quiet. Check the bedroom, someone ordered in Korean. Drawers slammed open. Her closet doors banged against the walls. They were tearing through her things like animals hunting prey. Zarya pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Not here, another voice reported. Bathroom. Footsteps approached. Zarya's entire body went rigid. The bathroom doorknob turned, rattled. Someone pushed against it. Miss Vale. The same rough voice from before, closer now, just inches of wood between them. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. Zarya didn't believe that for a second. My employer has concerns, the voice continued, about your relationship with Cairo Jin. He thinks you're a bad influence, a distraction. The door shuddered as someone kicked it. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Another kick. The wood around the lock started to crack. Zarya looked around desperately. The bathroom window was tiny, maybe 18 inches wide. She couldn't fit through it even if she tried. She was trapped. The third kick splintered the door frame. That's when the gunshots started. Not in the bathroom, downstairs. In the street. Rapid bursts of automatic weapons fire followed by screaming and the sound of cars screeching to a halt. The men in her apartment froze. What the hell? One of them started. More gunshots, closer now, inside the building. Someone was fighting their way up the stairs. Pull back, the leader shouted. Move, move, move. Boots pounded across her apartment floor, heading for the door. Zarya heard them running down the hallway, their retreat chaotic and panicked. Then silence. Not complete silence. She could hear car alarms wailing outside. People shouting in Korean. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. And footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming toward the bathroom. Zarya held her breath. The footsteps stopped outside the broken door. Zarya. Cairo's voice cut through the darkness. It's me. You're safe. She didn't move immediately, couldn't. Her body had locked up, every muscle frozen in survival mode. Zarya, he said again, softer this time. I need you to open the door. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to unlock it. The door swung open. Cairo stood in her destroyed bathroom doorway, dressed in the same suit from dinner but now splattered with blood. His face was pale, his eyes wild with something between rage and terror. 2 bodyguards flanked him, weapons drawn, scanning the apartment. He looked at her, really looked at her, making sure she was intact. Then he crossed the space between them in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. Zarya collapsed against him. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood there shaking while Cairo held her like she might disappear if he let go. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so fucking sorry. Outside, police sirens screamed closer. One of the bodyguards cleared his throat. Sir, we need to move. Now. Cairo pulled back just enough to look at Zarya's face. Can you walk? She nodded. Good. We're leaving. The police will be handled. He grabbed her hand. Trust me. Zarya let him lead her out of the bathroom, through her ransacked apartment, past the splintered front door. The hallway was a mess. Bullet holes in the walls, blood on the floor, shell casings scattered like breadcrumbs. At the bottom of the stairs, 2 bodies lay crumpled against the wall. Zarya looked away. Cairo's sedan was parked at an angle in the middle of the street, engine running, back door open. He pushed her inside and climbed in after her. The bodyguards took the front seats. The car peeled away from the curb just as police cruisers rounded the corner. Zarya watched through the back window as her studio, her home, disappeared into the chaos of flashing lights and yellow tape. Everything she'd built in Seoul, gone in minutes. Where are we going? She asked. Cairo was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. Somewhere safe. Where's that? He looked at her then, his eyes dark and filled with something that looked like guilt. With me. Cairo's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower in Gangnam. The elevator opened directly into his private space, all sharp angles and expensive minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. Modern art hung on white walls. Everything was clean, cold, and perfectly controlled. Just like him. Except right now, Cairo looked anything but controlled. He paced the length of the living room while his head of security, a scarred man named Min Jun, gave his report. 4 attackers total, Min Jun said, consulting a tablet. All hired muscle. Low-level enforcers from the Busan Syndicate. Busan? Cairo stopped pacing. They're allied with my uncle. Yes, sir. So Dae-hyun sent them. Most likely. Cairo's hands curled into fists. How did they know about the dinner? About where she lived? We're still investigating, but Minjun hesitated. Sir, someone inside your organization leaked the information. It's the only explanation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Find them, Cairo said quietly. I want a name by morning. Yes, sir. Minjun bowed slightly and left. Zarya sat on the edge of a leather couch, still wearing her black dress, still shaking despite the blanket someone had draped over her shoulders. She watched Cairo move around the space like a caged animal, all controlled violence with nowhere to go. This is my fault, he said finally. What? I brought you into this world. I made you a target. He turned to face her. You were right. You should have stayed away from me. Zarya stood up slowly. The blanket fell to the floor. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't act like I'm some helpless victim who had no choice. I said yes to dinner. I took your call. I let you into my life. Because I pushed. Because I wanted to. Cairo stared at her across the pristine living room. The city lights behind him turned him into a silhouette, all sharp edges and darkness. Why? He asked. Why would you want anything to do with me? Zarya crossed the space between them, stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Because underneath all the violence and fear, she said quietly, I see someone who's tired of being alone. Cairo's breath caught. I see someone who's built so many walls, he forgot what it's like to be touched without flinching. Someone who's convinced himself that power is enough because it's easier than admitting he wants something real. Zarya, am I wrong? He didn't answer. Couldn't, because she'd just stripped him bare with nothing but words. Instead, he did the only thing that made sense. He kissed her. This time it wasn't desperate or possessive. It was honest, raw. 2 broken people reaching for something neither of them knew how to name. Zarya kissed him back. Her hands found his jacket, pushed it off his shoulders. His fingers tangled in her hair. They moved together toward his bedroom, leaving a trail of expensive fabric and terrible decisions behind them. In the morning, she'd regret this. In the morning, she'd remember all the reasons this was impossible. But right now, with Seoul burning below them and danger closing in from all sides, the only thing that mattered was this: the feeling of being alive, the feeling of being seen, the feeling of not being alone. Zarya woke up to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the distant hum of the city below. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The attack. The gunfire. Cairo pulling her from her destroyed apartment. The drive to his penthouse. And then she turned her head. Cairo lay beside her, still asleep, his face softer than she'd ever seen it. In sleep, he looked younger, less dangerous, almost vulnerable. Zarya slipped out of bed carefully, found one of his shirts, and pulled it on. It hung to her thighs like a dress. The penthouse was silent except for the whisper of climate control. She wandered through the space, studying it. Everything was expensive and impersonal, like a luxury hotel room designed for someone who never stayed anywhere long enough to leave a mark. No photos, no books, no evidence that anyone actually lived here, just money and emptiness. She found the kitchen and made coffee, her hands still shaky from last night's adrenaline crash. While it brewed, she stared out at Seoul spreading beneath her like a glittering trap. You're up early. Zarya turned. Cairo stood in the doorway wearing black pants and nothing else. His torso was a map of old scars, knife wounds, bullet grazes, burns. Evidence of a life lived violently. Couldn't sleep, she said. He crossed to the coffee maker and poured himself a cup. They stood side by side, not quite touching, watching the sunrise paint Seoul gold. What happens now? Zarya asked. I deal with my uncle. How? However I have to. She looked at him. Will you kill him? Cairo's jaw tightened. He tried to have you killed. So yes, probably. And if you do? What then? Then the families aligned with him will retaliate. There'll be war. People will die. He set down his coffee cup. But you'll be safe. That's all that matters. Zarya shook her head. That's not all that matters. To me it is. Cairo? His phone buzzed, cutting her off. He checked it, his expression darkening. What is it? Minjun found the leak. Cairo's voice was cold. One of my drivers, guy named Park. He's been feeding information to my uncle for 3 months. What are you going to do? Cairo didn't answer, just grabbed his phone and left the kitchen. Zarya followed him to his bedroom, where he pulled on a shirt and started buttoning it with mechanical precision. Cairo, talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. A traitor gets dealt with. Dealt with how? He looked at her then, his eyes empty, the monster sliding back into place. You don't want to know. Yes, I do. No. He finished buttoning his shirt. You don't. Because if you knew what I'm about to do, you'd look at me differently, and I'm not ready for that yet. Zarya grabbed his arm. I already know what you are. You told me yourself you're a monster, but last night you were also the man who saved my life. So don't shut me out now. Cairo pulled away gently. I'm keeping you alive, Zarya. That means making decisions you'll hate, doing things you can't forgive. Try me. For a moment, she thought he might let her in completely. Then his phone buzzed again. He checked it, and his expression went blank. I have to go. Where? To handle this. He grabbed a jacket from the closet. Stay here. Don't leave for any reason. My security will be outside the door. Cairo. He kissed her, hard and fast and final. I'll be back tonight, he said against her lips. I promise. Then he was gone. Zarya stood alone in his bedroom, wearing his shirt, surrounded by his things, and realized she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd chosen him, despite the danger, despite the violence, despite every logical reason to run. She'd chosen the monster over safety, and she had no idea if that made her brave or stupid. Cairo's driver was being held in a warehouse near the shipping docks, one of the anonymous buildings Cairo's organization used for things that couldn't happen in public. The space was cold, concrete floors, metal walls. A single chair in the middle of the room where Park sat bound and gagged, his face already bruised from the initial interrogation. Cairo's men stepped back when he entered. Minjun stood off to the side, arms crossed, expression neutral. Cairo walked slowly toward the chair. Park started crying behind the gag. Muffled pleas, promises. The usual performance traders gave when they realized begging wouldn't save them. Take it off, Cairo ordered. One of his men removed the gag. Park immediately started babbling. Mr. Jin, please, I can explain. Explain what? Cairo's voice was conversational, calm. That you've been feeding information to my uncle? That you told him about the woman? That you're the reason armed men broke into her home last night? I didn't know they were going to hurt her. I swear I just what? Park's face crumpled. Your uncle offered me money. A lot of money. He said he just wanted to keep tabs on you, keep you safe from making bad decisions. Bad decisions. That's what he called it. The woman. He said she was dangerous. That she'd make you weak. Cairo pulled out a handgun, a sleek black Glock, and checked the chamber with practiced efficiency. Park went pale. Please, he whispered. I have a family, a wife, 2 kids. Please, Mr. Jin. Cairo looked at him, really looked at him, saw the fear, the desperation, the pathetic hope that mercy existed in a world built on violence. Your family will be taken care of, Cairo said quietly. They'll receive a pension. Your wife will get a job with one of my legitimate businesses. Your kids will have money for college. Park's face flooded with relief. Thank you, Mr. Jin. Thank you. Cairo raised the gun and shot him between the eyes. The sound echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Park's body slumped forward in the chair, blood pooling on the concrete beneath him. Cairo handed the gun to Min Jun without looking at it. Clean this up, he said, and make sure his family gets what I promised. Yes, sir. Cairo walked out of the warehouse into the gray morning light. His hands were steady. His breathing was normal. He felt nothing, just like always. Except this time, something was different. This time, he thought about Zarya waking up in his bed, wearing his shirt, looking at him like he might be worth saving. And for the first time in his life, Cairo wondered if the cost of power was too high. Isfad. Zarya spent the morning exploring Cairo's penthouse like an archaeologist studying ruins. His closet was full of identical black suits. His kitchen was stocked with expensive food that looked like it had never been touched. His bathroom contained high-end toiletries lined up with military precision. Everything perfect, everything controlled, everything empty. She found his office tucked behind a minimalist door near the living room. Unlike the rest of the penthouse, this space felt lived in. Papers covered the desk. Multiple computer screens displayed financial data, security camera feeds, and encrypted messages. A wall-mounted screen showed a map of Seoul divided into colored zones, presumably territories controlled by different factions. Zarya shouldn't look. She looked anyway. The financial records were coded, but even she could tell they represented massive amounts of money moving through shell companies, construction contracts, shipping manifests, real estate holdings, the criminal empire, distilled into spreadsheets. One folder caught her eye. It was labeled simply, Family. She opened it. Inside were dossiers on various members of the Jin family, photos, background checks, detailed notes about alliances, weaknesses, and potential threats. She found Dae Hyun-jin's file. The man who'd ordered her killed. His photo showed a stern-faced man in his 60s with cold eyes and an expensive suit. The notes detailed his role in the organization, his connections to Busan syndicates, and his recent activities, including a highlighted section, actively recruiting allies to oppose Cairo's leadership, considers nephew's behavior erratic and dangerous. Quote, love makes men weak. Weak men get killed. Zarya's hands tightened on the folder. This wasn't just family drama. This was a power struggle. And she was the excuse they were using to justify tearing the empire apart. She kept reading. More files, more names, more evidence of the vast web of violence and corruption that Cairo controlled. Then she found a file that made her blood run cold. It was labeled Zarya Vale. Inside was everything. Her background, her parents' deaths, her move to Seoul, photos of her studio, a detailed timeline of every interaction she'd had with Cairo. And at the bottom, in Cairo's handwriting, protection status, critical. Threat assessment, maximum. Response protocol, eliminate all threats permanently. Zarya set down the folder carefully. He'd been investigating her from the beginning, cataloging her life like she was a business asset, planning how to protect her like she was inventory that needed securing. Was any of it real, or was she just another piece on his chessboard? You weren't supposed to see that. Zarya spun around. Cairo stood in the doorway, still wearing the same clothes from this morning, but now there was blood on his sleeve. Fresh blood. You investigated me, Zarya said. Yes. From the start. Yes. Was any of it real? Or am I just another asset you're managing? Cairo walked into the office slowly. I investigate everyone. It's how I stay alive. That's not an answer. It's the truth. The truth is you treat people like resources. Her voice rose. You catalog them, analyze them, decide their value, and then what? Eliminate them when they're no longer useful? I've never lied to you about what I am. No, but you let me believe there was something human underneath. Zarya gestured at the files scattered across his desk. This isn't human, Cairo. This is cold. This is exactly what you said you were. A monster who only cares about power. Cairo's jaw clenched. I care about keeping you alive. By killing people? By treating me like some helpless asset that needs protecting? You need protecting because my world is trying to kill you. Then maybe I should leave your world, The words hung between them like broken glass. Cairo went very still. Is that what you want? Zarya's hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time, from anger, from frustration, from the terrible realization that she'd fallen for someone who might never be more than the sum of his violence. I don't know what I want, she said quietly. But I know I can't be with someone who treats me like a problem that needs solving. You're not a problem. Then what am I? Cairo crossed the space between them in 3 steps, grabbed her shoulders, looked into her eyes with something raw and desperate. You're the only thing in my life that feels real, he said. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I think about is whether you're safe. Every decision I make, I'm calculating how it affects you. Every person I threaten, every deal I make, every bullet I fire, it's all to keep you alive. That's not love, Cairo. That's obsession. Maybe it is, but it's all I have. Zarya felt tears burning behind her eyes. That's not enough. His hands dropped. What do you want from me? I want you to choose, me or the Empire, love or power. You can't have both. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're terrified of being vulnerable, so you hide behind violence and control and convince yourself that power is safer than love. She stepped back. But I can't be with someone who's only half alive, who only feels human when he's near me, but refuses to actually be human. Cairo looked like she'd shot him. If I give up the Empire, he said slowly, my enemies will kill us both. There's no retirement in my world, no walking away. You stay powerful or you die. Then we're already dead. Don't say that. It's true. Zarya's voice cracked. As long as you're the king of soul, I'm just a target. And eventually, someone's going to get through your defenses. Someone's going to... His phone buzzed. Cairo ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, he pulled it out and checked the screen. His face went white. What is it? Zarya asked. He showed her the message. It was a photo of her studio, or what was left of it, burned, completely destroyed, nothing but charred walls and ashes. Below the photo, a text. This is what happens when the Jin family is disrespected. Walk away from the girl, or next time it'll be her. The message was from Dae Hyun. Cairo's shot started shaking, not with fear, with rage. I'm going to kill him, he said quietly. Cairo, he burned down your studio. He tried to have you murdered. He's threatening your life to control me. His eyes were flat, dead. I'm going to cut his throat and watch him bleed out. And then what? You said it yourself. There'll be war. People will die. I don't care. I care. Zarya grabbed his arm. I care because those people are dying over me, over something I never asked for. You didn't ask for any of this, but you're in it now. Then help me get out. Cairo stared at her. What? Help me leave Seoul. Give me money. Give me protection. Give me whatever I need to disappear, but don't start a war over me. No. Cairo. No. His voice turned hard. I'm not letting you run. I'm not letting them win. And I'm sure as hell not letting my uncle threaten the woman I... He stopped. The words hung in the air between them, unfinished but unmistakable. Zarya felt her heart crack open. The woman you what? She whispered. Cairo looked at her with something like agony in his eyes. The woman I love, he said finally. The confession hit her like a physical blow. All the fight drained out of her, all the anger, all the fear. Because she felt it too. Despite everything, the violence, the danger, the impossibility of it all, she loved him back. God help her. She loved the monster. We're going to die, aren't we? She said quietly. Cairo pulled her against his chest, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world coming apart. Not if I can help it. His phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Min Jun. Sir, your uncle has called an emergency council meeting. He's demanding you appear tomorrow night to answer for your actions. If you don't show, the families will consider it a declaration of war. Cairo read it twice. Then he looked at Zarya. I have to go, he said. To the meeting? Yes. It's a trap. I know. They're going to try to kill you. Probably. Zarya grabbed his face with both hands. Then don't go. Run. We'll both run. Get out of Seoul and never look back. Cairo kissed her forehead gently. I can't run from this. If I don't face them, they'll hunt us forever. But if I go to the meeting, if I deal with my uncle and the families directly, there's a chance I can end this. What kind of chance? A small one. And if it doesn't work? His eyes met hers. Honest. Unflinching. Then you take the money I've set aside for you and you disappear. Live the life you came to Seoul to build. Forget about me. I could never forget about you. Then remember me as someone who tried to be better, someone who almost made it. Tears spilled down Zaria's cheeks. Cairo wiped them away with his thumb. Tomorrow night, he said quietly. One way or another, this ends. Outside, Seoul glittered beneath gathering storm clouds. And somewhere in the darkness, enemies sharpened their knives. The point of no return had arrived, and there was no turning back. The council meeting was set for midnight. Of course it was. These old-world gangsters loved their theater. The dramatic timing, the symbolic locations, the sense of ancient ritual wrapped around modern brutality. Cairo spent the day preparing like a man going to his own execution. He sat in his office reviewing security protocols, updating his will, and transferring money into accounts Zaria could access if everything went wrong. Minjun came and went with reports, each one grimmer than the last. Your uncle has 12 families backing him, Minjun said, his scarred face impassive. They're bringing armed security. The meeting location is the old Jang warehouse in Yongsan, neutral territory, but it's surrounded by docks. Easy to make bodies disappear. Cairo didn't look up from the documents he was signing. How many men can we bring? The council rules say each leader gets 4 guards maximum. They'll break that rule. Yes, sir, they will. Then we break it too. I want 20 men positioned around the perimeter, snipers on the adjacent buildings. Extraction vehicles on standby. Minjun nodded. And if negotiations fail? Then we paint that warehouse red. After Minjun left, Cairo sat alone in the silence of his office. The sun was setting over Seoul, turning the glass towers into pillars of fire. Beautiful and lethal, just like everything else in this city. The door opened quietly. Zaria stepped inside carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd been crying. He could see the redness around her eyes. But her hands were steady as she set 1 cup on his desk. You should eat something, she said. I'm not hungry. Cairo, I can't think about food right now. He looked up at her. I can barely think about anything except how to keep you alive. Zaria pulled a chair close and sat down. What if we just left? Right now. We could be at the airport in 30 minutes. They'd shoot down the plane. That's insane. That's my world. Cairo reached across the desk and took her hand. These families, they don't forgive disrespect. They don't accept defeat. If I run, they'll spend years hunting us. They'll kill everyone I've ever cared about just to send a message. So you're going to let them kill you instead. I'm going to try very hard not to die. Zaria's fingers tightened around his. And if you do, then Minjun will get you out of Seoul, out of Korea. He has instructions to take you somewhere they'll never find you. I don't want to run without you. You won't have a choice. She pulled her hand away, anger flashing across her face. Stop talking like you're already dead. I'm being realistic. You're being fatalistic. She stood up, pacing the length of his office. There has to be another way. Some kind of negotiation, something that doesn't end with you in a coffin. There is one option, Cairo said quietly. Zaria stopped. What? I give you up, publicly, in front of the council. I tell them I was wrong, that you meant nothing, that it was just a temporary distraction. I agree to marry whoever my uncle chooses and cut all ties with you. The words hung in the air like poison. They'd believe that? Zaria asked. Probably not, but it might buy you time, safety, a chance to disappear before they realize I'm lying. And then what happens to you? Cairo smiled without humor. Then I become exactly what they want me to be. The perfect monster. No weaknesses, no humanity, just power. Zaria crossed back to the desk and slapped him. The crack echoed through the office. Cairo's head snapped to the side. He touched his cheek, felt the sting, looked at her with something like surprise. Don't you dare, Zaria said, her voice shaking. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself by becoming less than what you are. What I am is a killer. You're also the man who held me while I shook, who listens to jazz, who stands outside my studio at midnight because being near me makes you feel human. Tears streamed down her face. You're the man I fell in love with, and I won't let you erase that to save me. Cairo stood slowly and pulled her into his arms. They held each other as the sun disappeared completely, and Seoul's neon heartbeat took over the skyline. Two people caught in a trap with no exits, clinging to the only thing that felt real. If I survive tonight, Cairo whispered against her hair, we leave. Together. We walk away from all of it. You promise? I promise. He was lying. They both knew it. But sometimes love meant believing impossible things. The Jiang warehouse squatted on the edge of the Yongsan docks, like a concrete tombstone. Rusted metal walls, broken windows, the smell of salt water and decay. Cairo's convoy arrived at exactly midnight. 4 black sedans pulling into the gravel lot where a dozen other vehicles already waited. Security teams stood in tight clusters, hands resting on concealed weapons, eyes tracking every movement. Cairo stepped out of the lead car, flanked by Min Jun and 3 other bodyguards. He dressed for war, black suit, black shirt, no tie. Clean lines and nothing that could be grabbed in a fight. The warehouse door stood open. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights illuminated a space that had been cleared for this meeting. A long table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by chairs occupied by Seoul's most dangerous men. 12 family heads, each one representing a piece of the criminal empire that controlled the city. And at the head of the table sat Dae Hyun Jin. He looked exactly like his photograph, cold eyes, expensive suit, the bearing of a man who'd ordered more deaths than most people could imagine. He didn't stand when Cairo entered, didn't acknowledge him at all, except for a slight narrowing of his eyes. You're late, Dae-hyun said. Traffic, Cairo replied. A few of the other bosses smirked. Most just stared with the flat effect of predators sizing up prey. Cairo recognized them all. Park of the Busan Syndicate, Choi, who ran the gambling operations, Lee, who controlled the ports, men he'd worked with, negotiated with, occasionally threatened. Now they sat in judgment. Sit. Dae-hyun gestured to an empty chair across from him. Cairo remained standing. I prefer not to. It wasn't a request. I don't take orders from you, uncle. The temperature in the room dropped. Dae-hyun's face hardened. You will show respect in this council. Respect? Cairo let the word hang. You tried to have an innocent woman killed. You burned down her studio. You sent me threats like I'm some low-level punk who needs to be disciplined. Where's the respect in that? Murmurs rippled through the assembled bosses. Dae-hyun stood slowly. That woman is making you weak. The entire underworld sees it. You're distracted, compromised, unfit to lead. Because I refuse to become a monster like you? Because you're choosing pussy over power. Dae-hyun slammed his hand on the table. Our family built this empire on blood and discipline. We don't soften for foreign whores who don't understand our ways. Cairo moved so fast, 3 bodyguards barely had time to react. He crossed the distance to Dae-hyun in 2 steps, grabbed the older man by the throat, and slammed him against the concrete wall hard enough to crack the surface. Say one more word about her, Cairo hissed, and I'll snap your neck right here. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards drew weapons. Bosses shouted orders. Minjun and Cairo's other guards formed a defensive line, but nobody fired. Not yet. Because everyone in that room knew that the moment the first shot rang out, they'd all die in the crossfire. Let him go, Park said, his voice carrying authority. This isn't how we settle disputes. Cairo's fingers tightened on his uncle's throat. Dae-hyun's face was turning purple. Cairo, Minjun said quietly from behind him. Not like this. For 5 long seconds, Cairo considered it. Considered ending this right now, taking his uncle's life and damn the consequences. Then he released his grip. Dae-hyun collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. Cairo stepped back, his hands steady, his expression empty. This council was called to determine your fitness to lead, Park said, standing. But what I see is a young man consumed by emotion, by attachment to a woman who has no place in our world. She has a place in my world, Cairo said. Your world is our world. You don't get to separate them. Then maybe I don't want to be part of your world anymore. Silence. The bosses stared at him like he'd just confessed to treason, which, in a way, he had. Choi leaned forward. Are you saying you want to leave the organization? I'm saying I'm tired of living like this, of killing people because they disrespect me, of treating human beings like resources, of building an empire on fear. Cairo looked at each face around the table. I want out, Daehyun laughed, a wet, choking sound. You stupid boy, there is no out. You're Jin family. You're blood. You don't retire from blood. Watch me. If you walk away, Lee said slowly, we'll consider it an act of war. Every business you control, every territory you claim, every dollar you've made, it all stays with the organization. You'll leave with nothing. I don't care about the money. You should, Park said, because without our protection, you're just another target. And that woman you're so desperate to save, she becomes the easiest way to hurt you. Cairo felt ice spreading through his chest. This was the trap. Not the meeting, not the threats, not even the violence. The trap was the choice itself. Stay and lose his humanity. Leave and lose Zarya. I have a proposal, Daehyun said, his voice rough from being choked. He'd pushed himself upright, straightening his suit. A way to solve this that benefits everyone. I'm listening, Cairo said carefully. You give up the girl, publicly, completely. You marry the woman we've selected for you, Min Seo Hwang, daughter of our Incheon partners. You recommit to the organization and stop this embarrassing behavior. Daehyun smiled coldly. In exchange, we let the foreign whore live. She leaves Korea unharmed. We even give her enough money to rebuild her pathetic studio somewhere else. And if I refuse, then we kill her tonight, while you watch. And then we kill everyone she's ever cared about, just to make sure you understand the price of defiance. The warehouse went quiet. Cairo's mind raced through options, scenarios, outcomes. His men were outnumbered. The snipers he'd positioned outside wouldn't help if these bosses decided to execute Zarya immediately. And even if he fought his way out, they'd hunt her forever, unless he gave them what they wanted. How do I know you'll keep your word? Cairo asked. You don't, Park said, but it's the only deal you're getting. Cairo looked at Minjun. His head of security's face was carefully blank, but his eyes said everything. This is the only play. I need time to think, Cairo said. You have 5 seconds, Daehyun replied. That's not 5, 4, 3. Fine, Cairo's voice cracked like a whip. Fine. I accept your terms. Relief rippled through the room. The bosses settled back in their chairs, satisfied smiles appearing on their faces. They'd won. Forced the rebellious nephew back into line. Proved that power always trumped love. Smart choice, Daehyun said. Now we just need to make it official. What do you mean? Daehyun gestured to one of his bodyguards. The man left the warehouse. 30 seconds later, he returned, pushing Zarya in front of him. Cairo's world stopped. She was bound, gagged, her eyes wide with terror and fury. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. What the fuck is this? Cairo snarled. Insurance, Daehyun said calmly. You'll reject her publicly, in front of this council. Tell her she meant nothing, that it was just sex, that you're done with her. You said if I agreed, I said we'd let her live. I never said you wouldn't have to earn it. Daehyun walked over to Zarya and grabbed her hair, forcing her head back. Go ahead, nephew. Tell her the truth. Zarya's eyes found Cairo's. He saw everything in that gaze. Fear, betrayal, and underneath it all, understanding. She knew what he had to do. I'm sorry, Cairo whispered. Then he looked at Zarya and felt his soul tear in half. You were a mistake, he said, his voice flat. Empty. A distraction. I was bored, and you were available. That's all it ever was. Tears streamed down Zarya's face. The sex was fine, Cairo continued, each word like swallowing glass. But you're not worth dying over. You're not worth anything, actually. Just another foreign woman who thought she could trap a rich man. Daehyun smiled. Keep going. I'm done with you. When they let you go, you'll take whatever money they give you and disappear. If I ever see you again, I'll kill you myself. Zarya made a sound behind the gag. something between a sob and a scream. Cairo forced himself to look away. Satisfied? He asked Dae-hyun. Almost. His uncle pulled out a handgun and pressed it against Zarya's temple. But I think we need one more guarantee of your commitment. Cairo's heart stopped. Kill her yourself, Dae-hyun said, offering the gun. Right here, right now. Prove that she means nothing. The warehouse went silent except for Zarya's muffled breathing. Every boss leaned forward, watching. This was the real test. This was the moment they'd strip away the last piece of humanity Cairo had left. No, Cairo said. Dae-hyun's smile vanished. What? I said no. Cairo's voice was steel. I agreed to your terms. I rejected her publicly. But I'm not a murderer of innocent women. You've killed plenty of people. People in the game, people who knew the risks, not some designer whose only crime was caring about the wrong man. Then you're weak, Dae-hyun said. And weak men don't lead this organization. He cocked the gun. Cairo moved. Everything happened in fractured seconds. He drew the weapon hidden in his jacket, fired twice, hit both of Dae-hyun's bodyguards before they could react. Min-jun and his men opened fire. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Bosses dove for cover. Bodyguards returned fire. Bullets tore through metal and concrete. Cairo ran toward Zarya. Dae-hyun still had the gun to her head, using her as a shield. Don't! Cairo shouted. His uncle's finger tightened on the trigger. That's when the window above them shattered. A sniper round punched through Dae-hyun's shoulder, spinning him around. The gun flew from his hand. Cairo caught Zarya as she fell forward, ripped off her gag, cut her restraints with a knife he pulled from his ankle. Can you run? He asked. She nodded, gasping. Then run! They sprinted toward the warehouse's back exit, while Min-jun's team provided covering fire. Behind them, someone screamed, Don't let them escape! More gunfire, more chaos. Cairo kicked open the emergency exit, and they burst into the night. A black sedan screeched up beside them, Min-jun in the driver's seat. Get in! They dove into the back. The car peeled away before the door was even closed. Bullets shattered the rear window. Cairo pushed Zarya down, covering her with his body as glass rained over them. The sedan fishtailed around a corner, straightened, accelerated down the dock road doing 80 miles an hour. Are they following? Cairo asked. Min-jun checked the mirror. 3 vehicles, armed pursuit. Lose them. Working on it. The sedan screamed through Yongsan's industrial district. Left turn, right turn, straight through a red light. Horns blared, pedestrians scattered. Zarya sat up, shaking, her eyes wild. What just happened? She gasped. My uncle was going to kill you, Cairo said, so I killed him first. Is he dead? I don't know. I don't care. We need to get out of Seoul, tonight. Sir, Min-jun interrupted, we have a problem. What? They're not just following us, they're corralling us. 3 more vehicles just cut off the eastern route, 2 more blocking the highway entrance. Cairo looked out the window. Min-jun was right. This wasn't just pursuit. It was a coordinated trap. Someone had planned for this, had predicted his move, had positioned forces to capture them no matter which direction they ran. Who organized this? Cairo demanded. I don't know, sir. This level of coordination requires... Min-jun stopped. His eyes went wide. Then he jerked the steering wheel hard left. The sedan swerved violently. Zarya screamed. Cairo grabbed the door handle. They missed the spike strip by inches. It had been stretched across the road in front of them, a perfectly placed trap that would have shredded their tires if Min-jun hadn't seen it in time. This is wrong, Min-jun said, his voice tight. This is too organized, too precise. Someone knew our exact route. Cairo's blood went cold. Stop the car, he said. Sir, we can't. Stop the fucking car! Min-jun slammed the brakes. The sedan screeched to a halt in the middle of an empty street. Cairo turned to his head of security, the man who'd served him for 5 years, who'd protected him through a dozen assassination attempts, who knew every secret, every safe house, every emergency protocol. How did they know? Cairo asked quietly. Min-jun's face was pale. Sir, I don't... How did they know our route? How did they know about the snipers? How did they know I'd run? I swear to you, I didn't... Cairo pulled his gun and pressed it against Minjun's temple. "Tell me the truth." Silence. Then Minjun's shoulders sagged. "They have my daughter," he whispered. The words hit Cairo like a physical blow. "What?" "3 days ago. They took her from school, sent me photos, said if I didn't help them, they'd kill her." Tears streamed down Minjun's scarred face. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. But she's 8 years old. She's all I have." Cairo felt something break inside him. Not anger, not betrayal, just exhaustion. "Who has her?" he asked. "Your uncle. But he's not working alone." "Who then?" Minjun looked at him with devastated eyes. "Everyone. All 12 families. This wasn't just about controlling you or forcing you to give up the girl. This was a coup. They've been planning it for months." Zarya made a small sound of horror. Cairo lowered the gun. "So this whole thing, the meeting, the demands, all of it, it was theater?" "Yes, sir. They were always going to kill you and her. They just wanted to humiliate you first. And you helped them." "I had no choice." "There's always a choice." Cairo raised the gun again. Minjun closed his eyes. "Make it quick, please." For a long moment, Cairo's finger rested on the trigger. Then he lowered the weapon. "Get out," he said. Minjun's eyes snapped open. "Sir?" "Get out of the car. Take whatever money you need. Get your daughter back. Disappear. If I ever see you again, I will kill you. But tonight you get to live." "Sir, I don't deserve—" "I know. Now get out before I change my mind." Minjun stumbled out of the sedan, tears still streaming down his face. Cairo slid into the driver's seat. Behind them, headlights appeared. Multiple vehicles. Getting closer. "What do we do?" Zarya asked, her voice small. Cairo looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was terrified, bleeding, shaking from adrenaline and shock, but she was alive. And as long as she was alive, he still had something to fight for. "Hold on," he said. Then he slammed the accelerator to the floor. The sedan shot forward into the Seoul night. Behind them, the entire criminal underworld gave chase. Ahead of them, nothing but darkness and the slim hope that somehow, against every odd, they might survive until morning. Cairo had lost his empire, lost his protection, lost everything except the woman in his back seat and the weapon in his hand. But he'd learned something tonight, something that changed everything. His uncle wasn't the real enemy. The entire system was. And if he wanted to survive, if he wanted to save Zarya, he'd have to become something worse than a monster. He'd have to become a ghost. The sedan's engine screamed as Cairo pushed it past 90 through Seoul's midnight streets. Behind them, headlights multiplied. 5 vehicles. Then 7. Then too many to count. The entire underworld had mobilized. Zarya braced herself in the back seat, one hand gripping the door handle, the other pressed against the ceiling. Blood from the cut on her forehead had dried in a dark line down her face. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the roar of the engine. "I don't know," Cairo replied honestly. He yanked the wheel left, threading the sedan between 2 trucks. The side mirrors scraped metal. Sparks flew. A bullet shattered the remaining rear window. Zarya ducked, glass raining over her for the second time that night. Cairo checked the rear view. 3 black SUVs were gaining ground, armed men leaning out the windows with automatic weapons. "Get down!" he yelled. More gunfire. The back windshield disintegrated completely. Rounds punched through the seats, through the dashboard, one passing so close to Cairo's head he felt the displacement of air. He jerked the wheel right, cutting through a red light. A taxi horn blared. Pedestrians scattered. The SUVs followed like sharks sensing blood. Cairo's mind raced through options. Every safe house was compromised. Every ally was either dead or had betrayed him. The airport was impossible. The ports were controlled by Lee's family. They had nowhere to go, and their pursuers knew it. "Cairo!" Zarya's voice cut through his thoughts. "Left! Go left!" He didn't question it, just yanked the wheel. The sedan screamed into a narrow alley between 2 buildings, barely wide enough for the vehicle. Metal scraped concrete on both sides. Behind them, the SUVs were too wide. They screeched to a halt at the alley entrance, but men poured out on foot. Cairo floored the accelerator. The alley opened into a small plaza. He spun the wheel, drifted around a fountain, and shot out the other side onto a main road. "Where did that go?" he gasped. I used to walk through there from the subway, Zarya said, when I first moved here. Before she met him, before her life became this nightmare of bullets and blood. Cairo pushed the thought away and focused on survival. They had maybe 2 minutes before the pursuit reorganized. 2 minutes to find cover or transportation or some miracle that would keep them alive past dawn. His phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the caller ID, unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered, Cairo Jean. The voice on the other end was familiar. Cold. Smooth as poisoned honey. Park, the Busan syndicate boss. I'm a little busy, Cairo said, swerving around a delivery truck. I can see that. You're heading north on Gangnam Boulevard doing approximately 100 kilometers per hour. Very impressive. Cairo's stomach dropped. They were tracking him. GPS in the car, maybe, or satellites, or something he hadn't even considered. What do you want? He asked. To offer you a deal. One final chance to end this without more bloodshed. I'm listening. Pull over. Surrender the woman. Accept your execution with dignity. In exchange, we'll make it quick, painless, and we'll leave her body intact for burial. Cairo laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. That's your deal? I die quickly? You are always going to die, boy. This way you get to choose how. Fuck you. Think about the girl, Park continued. If you keep running, we'll catch you eventually. And when we do, we'll make her death last days. We'll let every man in the organization take turns. Cairo hung up. His hands were shaking on the wheel, not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like fire in his veins. What did they say? Zarya asked quietly. Nothing worth repeating. She climbed into the front passenger seat, moving carefully through the space between the seats, settled beside him, put her hand on his arm. We're not going to make it, are we? She said. It wasn't a question. Cairo wanted to lie, wanted to tell her they'd find a way, that love would somehow be enough. But he'd spent his whole life surrounded by violence. He knew how these stories ended. No, he said quietly. We're not. Zarya nodded, took a shaky breath, then straightened in her seat. Then I have one request. Anything. When they catch us, when it's over, don't let them take me alive. Cairo's chest constricted. Zarya, promise me. Her voice was steel. I won't be tortured for days because you fell in love with me. I won't give them that satisfaction. He looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his world without fear, who'd rejected his money and his power, who'd seen the monster inside him and chosen to love it anyway. I promise, he whispered. She kissed him, hard and desperate and final, like goodbye. Then she pulled back and pointed ahead. There. Cairo followed her gaze. They were approaching the Han River, the wide, dark water cutting through Seoul's neon heart. Bridges stretched across it like arteries, and on the far side, barely visible in the distance, was the one place in the city that might give them a chance. Namsan Tower. The observation platform sat on top of a mountain in the center of Seoul. Tourist destination, romantic viewpoint, and more importantly, limited access roads. If they could reach it before the pursuit caught up, they might be able to make a stand. Hold out long enough for what? Cairo didn't know. But it was better than dying in a car chase. Hold on, he said. He aimed the sedan toward Namsan, pushing the dying engine one last time. Kick. The access road to Namsan Tower wound up the mountain in tight switchbacks, designed for tourist buses, not high-speed chases. Cairo took the turns at speeds that made the sedan's tires scream. The vehicle fishtailed around each curve, tires inches from the edge where the road dropped away into darkness. Zarya gripped the door handle so hard her knuckles went white. Behind them, headlights appeared at the base of the mountain. The pursuit had found them. Cairo pushed harder. The sedan's engine was making terrible sounds now, something grinding, something broken. They'd taken too much damage. The vehicle wouldn't last much longer. Halfway up the mountain, steam started pouring from the hood. Come on, Cairo muttered. Just a little further. The tower appeared ahead, lit up like a beacon. The plaza around it was empty at this hour. Just a few late-night tourists and couples enjoying the view. Cairo slammed the brakes. The sedan skidded to a stop in the middle of the plaza, tires leaving black marks across the pristine pavement. Tourists turned to stare. Cairo and Zarya stumbled out of the destroyed vehicle. She was bleeding. He was covered in glass. They looked like survivors of a war zone. "Run," Cairo said, grabbing her hand. They sprinted toward the tower entrance. Behind them, engines roared. The pursuit had reached the plaza. Cairo glanced back. 8 vehicles. Maybe 40 men. All armed. All closing in. They weren't going to make it. He pulled Zarya behind a concrete planter and drew his weapon. Checked the magazine. 6 rounds left. 6 bullets against 40 men. The math was simple and brutal. "I love you," he said. Zarya grabbed his face with both hands, kissed him one last time. "I love you too." The vehicle screeched to a halt in a semicircle around them. Doors opened. Armed men poured out. But they didn't shoot. Not yet. Instead, they formed a wall between Cairo and any escape route, weapons raised, faces cold. Then the crowd parted. A figure walked through. Not Dae Hyun. Cairo's uncle was either dead or too injured to pursue them personally. Instead, it was Park, the Busan boss, the man who'd called with the final offer. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, looking almost bored. "This is where it ends," Park said, "on top of a mountain, surrounded by tourists and city lights. Almost poetic." Cairo kept his weapon trained on Park's chest. "Stay back." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" "That's 1 bullet. You have 6. We have 40 men." Park smiled. "The math doesn't work in your favor." "I don't need it to work. I just need you dead. Even if you kill me, the others will finish what we started. Your death is inevitable, Cairo. The only question is how many innocent people die before you accept that." Cairo's finger tightened on the trigger. Park gestured at the tourists cowering near the tower entrance. "Go ahead. Start a shootout. Let those families watch their children get caught in the crossfire. Add their blood to the river you've already created." Zarya touched Cairo's arm gently. "Don't," she whispered. "He's right. I'm not letting them take you. You promised me something, remember?" Cairo's heart shattered. She was asking him to keep his promise, to end it quickly, to spare her the torture Park's men would deliver if they took her alive. He couldn't do it, couldn't raise his weapon to the woman he loved, couldn't pull the trigger on the only thing in his life that had ever felt real. "I can't," he choked out. "You have to." "Zarya." "How touching," Park interrupted. "But we're on a schedule, so here's what happens next. You both drop your weapons. You both kneel. My men will execute you here. Quick, professional. Then we go home and this unfortunate chapter closes." "And if we refuse?" Cairo asked. Park's expression hardened. "Then we do this the hard way. We kill every person in this plaza, starting with that family over there." He pointed at a mother and 2 small children huddled near the tower entrance. "Then those teenagers. Then that old couple. We keep killing until you surrender or run out of witnesses." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Park pulled out his own weapon and aimed it at the mother. "Shall we test that theory?" The woman screamed. Her children started crying. And Cairo realized he was trapped, not by bullets or numbers or strategy, by his own humanity, the last piece of himself that Zarya had kept alive. If he fought, innocent people died. If he ran, innocent people died. If he surrendered, at least the tourists would survive. It was the kind of choice that had no good answer, only less terrible ones. "Okay," Cairo said quietly. "Okay, you win." He started to lower his weapon. That's when the first sniper round punched through Park's shoulder. The Busan boss spun sideways, blood spraying. His weapon clattered to the ground. Chaos erupted. Park's men scattered, trying to locate the shooter. More rounds cracked through the night air. 2 more men dropped. Cairo grabbed Zarya and dove behind the concrete planter. "What the hell is happening?" she gasped. "I don't know." More gunfire, not from Park's men, from somewhere else. Somewhere above. Cairo risked a glance. Movement on the ridgeline beyond the plaza. At least 5 shooters. Professional, coordinated. Firing with precision that came from military training. And they were targeting Park's forces. "Who are they?" Zarya asked. Before Cairo could answer, his phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He answered. Don't shoot, a woman's voice said, American accent, calm, professional. We're here to help. Who is this? Someone who has a vested interest in keeping you alive. Your uncle's coup attempt has destabilized the entire Korean underworld. My organization finds that inconvenient. Your organization? Let's just say we operate in the shadows behind the shadows. And right now, Cairo Jin, you're more valuable to us alive than dead. The sniper fire continued. Park's men were falling back, dragging their wounded. What do you want? Cairo demanded. To offer you what your enemies wouldn't, a real choice. Which is? Survive, but understand that survival comes with a price. We'll extract you and the woman, get you out of Korea, set you up with new identities, new lives. In exchange, you'll owe us a favor, a big one, to be collected at a time of our choosing. Cairo's instincts screamed danger. This wasn't rescue. This was recruitment. Whatever organization this woman represented, they were worse than the families. Had to be. The Korean underworld was terrifying, but at least he understood the rules. These people operated outside any rules. And if I refuse, he asked, then we leave. Park's men regroup. You die here on this mountain. The woman dies screaming. Your choice. Zarya was staring at him, her eyes wide, reading the decision in his face. How much time do I have? Cairo asked. About 30 seconds before Park's reinforcements arrive. After that, even we can't help you. Cairo looked at Zarya. It's a trap, he said quietly. I know. Whatever they want from me, it's going to be worse than anything I've done before. I know. But it's the only way to keep you alive. Zarya took his hand. Then do it. Cairo raised the phone. We accept. Smart man, black helicopter, northwest corner of the plaza, 30 seconds. Don't be late. The line went dead. Cairo grabbed Zarya's hand and they ran. Behind them, Park was screaming orders through the pain in his shoulder. His men were regrouping, setting up a perimeter, but the sniper fire intensified, keeping them pinned. The helicopter appeared like a ghost dropping from the sky. Black, unmarked, rotors screaming. It touched down just long enough for Cairo and Zarya to throw themselves inside. Hands grabbed them, pulled them in. The helicopter lifted off immediately. Below, Park's men opened fire. Rounds pinged off the helicopter's armored hull. Then they were above the mountain, above the city, climbing into the night sky while souls spread out beneath them like a dying star. Cairo lay on the helicopter floor, gasping for air, his heart hammering. Beside him, Zarya was shaking, alive. Bleeding, but alive. He'd saved her. At what cost, he didn't know yet. But she was alive. A figure crouched beside them. Female, late 30s, short dark hair, eyes like winter frost. Welcome to the rest of your life, she said over the rotor noise. My name is Sarah Chen, and you both just became very interesting assets. Cairo wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers, but exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He'd been running on adrenaline and fear for hours. His body had nothing left. Where are we going? He managed. Sarah smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere you can't run from us. Somewhere you'll learn exactly what you've agreed to. She pulled out a syringe. But first you need to sleep, both of you. No. Cairo tried to move, but Sarah was faster. The needle pierced his neck. Cold spread through his veins. His vision blurred. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Zarya's face. She was crying. Or maybe he was. He couldn't tell anymore. Then nothing. Matt. Cairo woke to the smell of salt water and the sound of waves. His head pounded. His mouth tasted like copper. Every muscle in his body screamed. He opened his eyes slowly. White ceiling, white walls. Sunlight streaming through a window. Not a warehouse, not a prison cell. A bedroom. Expensive furniture, clean sheets. The kind of place that looked like luxury but felt like a cage. He sat up too fast. The room spun. Easy, a voice from the corner. You've been sedated for 18 hours. Your body needs time to adjust. Cairo's vision cleared. Sarah Chen sat in a chair by the window, reading something on a tablet. She'd changed clothes, now wearing casual black, looking more like a businesswoman than whatever she actually was. Where's Zarya? Cairo demanded. Next room, also awake, also fine. I want to see her. Soon, first we talk. Cairo swung his legs off the bed, stood, immediately regretted it as his knees buckled. Sarah didn't move to help him, just watched as he steadied himself against the wall. Where are we? He asked. An island, private, secure, approximately 200 kilometers off the coast of South Korea. And your organization? You don't get to know that yet. What you need to know is this. The Korean underworld thinks you're dead. We made sure of it. Planted evidence. Leaked information. As far as Seoul is concerned, Cairo Jin died on Namsan Mountain along with his foreign whore. Cairo's fists clenched. Don't call her that. Relax. I'm telling you what they believe, not what I think. Sarah set down the tablet. You're free, Cairo, free from your uncle, free from the families, free from the empire that was consuming you. At what cost? Like I said, a favor one will collect when the time is right. What kind of favor? The kind that requires a man with your particular skills, someone who knows how the underworld operates, someone who can go places and do things that official channels can't. Cairo laughed bitterly. You want me to be your attack dog. We want you to be our ghost, our invisible hand. Sarah stood and walked to the window. Outside, ocean stretched to the horizon. You get to live, Cairo. You get to be with the woman you love. You get to start over. And occasionally, maybe once a year, maybe once a decade, we'll call. And you'll answer. And if I refuse? Sarah turned to face him. Her expression didn't change, didn't threaten, didn't need to. Then we leak your location to Park, to your uncle's allies, to everyone who wants you dead. And we let nature take its course. Cairo stared at her. This was the trap, not rescue, not salvation, just a different kind of prison, one where he'd traded his old chains for new ones. Can I see Zarya now? He asked quietly. Sarah nodded. Door on your left. Take your time. Cairo walked out of the room on shaky legs. The hallway was short, clean, anonymous. He opened the door Sarah had indicated. Zarya sat on the edge of another bed, staring out another window at another view of endless ocean. She turned when he entered. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who'd survived the impossible, two people who'd lost everything to stay together. Then Zarya crossed the room and collapsed into his arms. They held each other while the ocean crashed against rocks below, and somewhere far away, Seoul continued its neon heartbeat without them. We made it, Zarya whispered. Cairo tightened his arms around her. Yeah, he said. We made it. But they both knew the truth. They'd survived. But the cost was a debt they might spend the rest of their lives paying. And somewhere in the shadows, Sarah Chen and her invisible organization were already planning how to collect. The war for Seoul was over. But a different kind of war, quieter, darker, infinitely more dangerous, had just begun. 3 months passed on the island like a fever dream. Cairo woke every morning to the sound of waves instead of gunfire, to sunlight instead of neon, to Zarya's breathing beside him instead of the cold emptiness that had defined his life for so long. The island was small, maybe 2 square kilometers of rocky coastline and dense forest. The compound sat on the eastern edge, a collection of white buildings that looked like a luxury resort but functioned as something else entirely. A prison, a training facility, a holding pen for people who'd made deals with devils they couldn't see. Sarah Chen visited once a week. Always professional, always distant. She'd bring supplies, check on their adjustment, and remind them with pleasant smiles that their debt remained unpaid. How are you settling in? She asked during one visit, sitting across from Cairo on the compound's terrace while ocean wind whipped through her short hair. Like a prisoner, Cairo replied. You're alive. That's more than you had 3 months ago. Alive isn't the same as living, Sarah smiled without warmth. You'll learn the difference. After she left, Cairo stood at the terrace edge and stared at the horizon. Somewhere beyond that line of sea and sky was Korea, Seoul, the empire he'd abandoned, the empire that thought he was dead. He wondered sometimes if they'd been right, if the man who died on Namsan Mountain was the real Cairo Jin, and this version, the one who woke up beside Zarya, who walked beaches instead of blood-stained streets, who hadn't killed anyone in 90 days, was just a ghost wearing his face. You're doing it again, Zarya said from behind him. Cairo turned. She stood in the doorway wearing a white sundress, her hair caught by the wind. 3 months of peace had changed her. The fear had faded from her eyes. The tension had left her shoulders. She looked like the woman he'd first seen in that Gangnam penthouse, before the violence, before the chaos, before he'd destroyed her life. Doing what? He asked. Disappearing inside your head. Going to that dark place where you convince yourself you don't deserve this. Maybe I don't. Zarya crossed the terrace and took his hand. We've had this argument 40 times. You're going to lose it 40 more. How can you forgive me? The question came out raw, desperate. I ruined everything you built. Your studio, your life, your... Stop. She placed a finger on his lips. I chose you, Cairo. Not because you forced me. Not because I was scared. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who'd forgotten how to be human. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could help you remember. Did it work? She smiled. You're standing here worried about whether you deserve happiness, instead of calculating how to acquire more power. I'd say it worked. Cairo pulled her close, and they stood like that for a long time, watching the sun paint the ocean gold. This was peace. Fragile. Temporary. Built on a foundation of debt and invisible chains. But it was real. And Cairo had learned that sometimes real was enough. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Cairo was in the compound's small gym, working through exercises that kept his body sharp, even if his mind had started to soften. Zarya was sketching by the window. She'd started designing again, filling notebooks with ideas for clothes she might never make. His phone buzzed, the phone Sarah had given him, the one that only rang when they wanted something. He picked it up. Cairo Jin. Sarah's voice was all business. We're collecting. His stomach dropped. 3 months. They'd given him 3 months of peace before pulling the trigger. When? He asked. Tonight. A boat will arrive at the North Dock at 2200 hours. Come alone. What's the job? Extraction. Simple. Clean. Someone needs to disappear from Seoul, and we need someone who knows the city's shadows. I'm not going back to Korea. You don't have a choice. We own you, remember? Cairo's grip tightened on the phone. If I refuse? Then we release information about a certain American designer living on a private island. Information that would be very interesting to the families who think she burned to death. I wonder how long it would take them to find this place. The threat was clear. Do the job or watch Zarya die. Fine, Cairo said quietly. I'll be there. Sarah hung up. Cairo stood in the gym, staring at the phone like it was a snake. Behind him, Zarya had stopped sketching. What did they want? She asked. A job. In Seoul. When? Tonight. Zarya set down her pencil carefully, stood, crossed to where he stood and took his face in her hands. Come back to me, she said. I will. Promise. I promise. They both knew he might be lying, but love meant believing impossible things. The boat was a sleek black speedboat that cut through the dark water like a blade. Cairo sat in the stern, wearing black tactical gear Sarah's people had provided. No weapons yet. Those would come later. The boat's pilot was a young Korean man who didn't speak, just drove with mechanical precision toward the distant lights of the mainland. Korea appeared on the horizon like a memory. Cairo's chest tightened as they got closer. He'd thought he'd never see this place again, thought he'd escaped. But you never really escaped, not from places that had shaped you, not from cities built on your blood. The boat docked at a private pier south of Busan. A car waited. Another black sedan, another anonymous driver. They drove in silence through streets Cairo recognized, past neighborhoods he'd once controlled, past buildings where he'd conducted business, past the invisible borders that divided the underworld's territories. Seoul hadn't changed. It never did. The car stopped outside a nondescript office building in Gangnam. Sarah Chen waited by the entrance, flanked by 2 operatives in dark suits. Glad you could make it, she said as Cairo got out. Like I had a choice. There's always a choice. You just didn't like the alternatives. Sarah gestured toward the building. Come, we'll brief you inside. They took a private elevator to the top floor. The office was sterile. White walls, minimal furniture, screens displaying surveillance feeds from across the city. Sarah pulled up a photograph on the main screen. A young woman, Korean, maybe 25. Frightened eyes. "This is Min-hee Park," Sarah said, "daughter of the Busan boss who tried to kill you 3 months ago. She's currently being held by her father as leverage in a territorial dispute. We need her extracted and brought to us alive." Cairo stared at the screen. "Why?" "Because she has information we need. Information about the family's operations. She's been feeding us intelligence for 6 months. She's your asset." "Was our asset?" "Father discovered her betrayal. Now he's planning to execute her publicly as an example. We can't allow that. So you want me to break into Park's compound, grab his daughter, and somehow get her out of Seoul alive?" "Essentially, yes," Cairo laughed without humor. "You do realize Park wants me dead? That his men would recognize me on sight? Which is why we've prepared this." Sarah handed him a tablet showing detailed schematics. "The compound's layout, guard rotations, security systems, entry and exit points, everything you need. Everything except a death wish. You've survived worse." Cairo studied the schematics. Park's compound was a fortress, high walls, armed guards, surveillance everywhere. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out alive with a hostage? Suicide. "How much time do I have?" he asked. "The execution is scheduled for 0300. It's currently 2100. 6 hours. More than enough for someone with your skills." Cairo set down the tablet. "And if I succeed, then you've made your first payment on an infinite debt." "That's not how this works." Sarah's expression hardened. "That's exactly how this works. You belong to us now, Cairo. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life becomes." For a moment, Cairo considered walking out, just leaving, letting them do whatever they wanted to Zarya, because at least then it would be over. Then he thought about her standing on the terrace, hair caught by wind, telling him he deserved happiness. And he knew he'd do whatever it took to get back to her, even if it meant becoming a monster again. "Give me a weapon," he said. Sarah smiled. "Now we're talking." Right. The compound sat in the hills north of Seoul, surrounded by forest and accessible only by a single winding road. Cairo approached on foot through the trees, moving silently despite the tactical gear weighing him down. The weapon Sarah had given him, a suppressed Glock with 3 extra magazines, pressed against his ribs. He'd studied the schematics during the drive, memorized guard positions, camera blind spots, patrol patterns, but plans meant nothing once bullets started flying. The compound's perimeter wall was 3 meters high, topped with cameras and motion sensors. Cairo found a blind spot on the western edge where trees created shadow. He scaled the wall in seconds, dropped into a manicured garden on the other side. A guard passed 10 meters away, flashlight cutting through darkness. Cairo waited until he was gone, then moved toward the main house. Park's daughter was being held in the basement. The schematics showed a single entrance through the kitchen, then down a service stairwell. Simple enough, except nothing was ever simple. Cairo reached the kitchen door and found it unlocked. Too easy. His instincts screamed trap, but he pushed forward anyway. Inside, the kitchen was dark and empty. Industrial appliances gleamed in moonlight from the windows. He crossed to the service stairwell, descended into shadows. The basement hallway was concrete and cold. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 3 doors, 2 open storage rooms and 1 locked cell at the end. Cairo approached the locked door carefully. A guard sat outside it, dozing in a chair. Cairo moved fast, wrapped an arm around the guard's throat, applied pressure. The man struggled for 5 seconds before going limp. Cairo lowered him gently to the floor and took his keys, unlocked the cell door. Inside, Min-hee Park sat on a bare cot, wrists bound, face bruised. She looked up when Cairo entered and her eyes went wide. "You're dead," she whispered in Korean. "Not yet." Cairo crossed to her and cut her restraints with a knife. "Can you walk?" "Who are you?" "Someone who's saving your life. Can you walk?" She nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Good. Stay close. Stay quiet. If I tell you to run, you run." They moved back through the basement, up the stairs, through the kitchen. Too easy. Way too easy. They reached the garden without encountering resistance. That's when Cairo knew something was wrong. He pulled Min-hee behind a hedge and scanned the compound. Guards were converging on their position, not rushing, not surprised, moving with coordinated precision, like they'd been waiting. "Fuck," Cairo muttered. This was a trap. Sarah had sent him into a trap. The question was why. Lights flooded the garden. Cairo pulled Min-hee down as gunfire erupted. Rounds tore through the hedge above them. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted toward the perimeter wall. More guards appeared, cutting off that route. Cairo changed direction, pulling Min-hee toward the east side of the compound. A service gate. Smaller, less defended. They made it 10 meters before a bullet caught Min-hee in the leg. She screamed and collapsed. Cairo grabbed her, half carrying, half dragging her toward cover. They ducked behind a stone fountain as bullets chipped away at the marble. "I can't," Min-hee gasped. Blood poured from her thigh. "You have to." Cairo ripped a piece of fabric from his shirt and tied it around her leg. "We're not dying here." "They knew you were coming," she said through gritted teeth. "My father knew." "How?" "Because someone told him." Cairo's blood ran cold. Sarah. Sarah had sold him out, sent him into a trap knowing he'd either die or be captured. But why? Unless... Understanding hit him like a bullet. This wasn't about extracting Min-hee. This was about making Cairo valuable. Sarah's organization wanted him battle-tested, wanted to see if he could survive impossible odds, wanted to measure his worth before investing more resources. He was a lab rat in a maze filled with knives. "Can you shoot?" he asked Min-hee. "What?" Cairo handed her the Glock. "Point at the guards. Pull the trigger. Don't think. Just shoot." She took the weapon with shaking hands. Cairo pulled out the knife he'd used to cut her restraints. "On 3, he said. "We go for the service gate. You shoot anything that moves. I'll clear the path." "This is insane." "Yeah, it is." He counted down. 3, 2, 1. They burst from cover. Min-hee fired wildly. The shots went wide, but the noise made guards duck. Cairo ran straight at them. He hit the first guard low, driving the knife up through his ribs, ripped it free, spun, caught the second guard's rifle arm and broke it at the elbow, stabbed him in the throat. Blood sprayed hot across Cairo's face. Behind him, Min-hee kept firing. They reached the service gate, locked. Cairo shot the lock mechanism and kicked it open. They stumbled through into the forest beyond. Pursuit erupted behind them. Flashlights, shouted orders, dogs barking. Cairo pulled Min-hee deeper into the trees, her blood leaving a trail they couldn't hide. "I can't keep going," she gasped. "You don't have to, just a little further." They crashed through undergrowth, branches tearing at clothes and skin. Then the trees opened into a clearing, and Cairo saw the second trap. Park himself stood waiting, flanked by a dozen armed men. All weapons trained on Cairo and Min-hee. "Did you really think," Park said calmly, "that I wouldn't know Cairo Jin was alive? That I wouldn't track every move your new employers made?" Cairo pushed Min-hee behind him. "This was your plan from the start," he said. "My plan was to use my daughter as bait to draw out the organization that's been bleeding my operations dry. You were just the delivery system." Park smiled. "Thank you for confirming their interest. Now I know exactly who to eliminate." "Let her go. She's just a kid." "She's a traitor, and traitors die." Park raised his weapon. Cairo did the only thing he could. He charged. Guns erupted. Pain exploded through Cairo's shoulder as a round punched through muscle. He didn't stop, reached Park in 3 steps, knocked the gun aside, drove his knife toward the older man's throat. Park blocked it. Barely. They grappled, 2 predators fighting for dominance while the forest echoed with gunfire and Min-hee's screaming. Cairo was faster, younger, angrier. He got the knife against Park's throat. "Call them off," Cairo hissed. Park laughed, blood on his teeth. "Or what? You'll kill me? Then my men kill you and the girl. We all die. Is that what you want?" Cairo's hand trembled. He could end it, right here. 1 slash and Park would bleed out in seconds. But then what? The guards would execute him and Min-hee. He'd die in this forest, miles from Zarya, having accomplished nothing. "That's what I thought," Park said. "You've gone soft, Jin. Love made you weak." The words hit something primal in Cairo's chest. Rage, pure and burning. "You're right," Cairo whispered. Then he slit Park's throat. Blood sprayed hot and dark. Park's eyes went wide with shock as he collapsed. The guards froze for one perfect second. That's when the forest exploded with gunfire from a different direction. Sarah's operatives burst from the trees, weapons blazing. The guards scattered. Some returned fire. Most just ran. Within 30 seconds, the clearing was a massacre. Sarah herself walked out of the smoke and shadows, a suppressed rifle in her hands. "Took you long enough," she said to Cairo. He stared at her, bleeding, exhausted, covered in Park's blood. "This was all a test," he said. "Of course it was. We needed to know if you still had it, if the soft life on that island had made you useless." Sarah smiled. "Congratulations. You passed. You used me. Used her." He gestured at Min-hee, who was being tended to by one of Sarah's medics. "We used everyone. That's what we do." Cairo felt something crack inside him. All of it. Every sacrifice. Every death. Every choice that had brought him to this moment. All just pieces on someone else's chessboard. "Take me back to the island," he said quietly. "Not yet. We need to debrief. Extract intelligence from Min-hee. Process what happened here." "Sarah." Cairo's voice dropped to something deadly. "Take me back to the island, now, or I walk away and you never see me again." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. You've earned a break. Ugh." Cairo returned to the island at dawn. The boat deposited him at the north dock, and he walked back to the compound on unsteady legs. His shoulder was bandaged where the bullet had grazed it. His hands were clean, but he could still feel Park's blood under his fingernails. He found Zarya on the terrace, exactly where he'd left her. She turned when she heard his footsteps. One look at his face, and she knew. "What did they make you do?" she whispered. Cairo collapsed into a chair, stared at the ocean he'd started to think of as home. "I killed someone," he said. "Not in self-defense, not because I had to, because I was angry, because he said love made me weak." Zarya sat beside him, took his hand. "Did it?" she asked quietly. "I don't know anymore." They sat like that while the sun rose over water, and somewhere far away, Sarah Chen's organization calculated the worth of Cairo Jin's soul. "I can't do this," Cairo said finally. "Can't be their weapon, can't keep killing people every time they demand it." "Then what?" "I don't know." Zarya squeezed his hand. "When I first met you, you were the most powerful man in Seoul. Now look at you, broken, lost, running from shadows that won't let you go. Is there a point to this?" "The point is you're still here, still breathing, still choosing to come back to me instead of disappearing into whatever darkness Sarah offers." She turned his face toward her. "The point is maybe love doesn't make you weak. Maybe it's the only thing keeping you human." Cairo felt tears burning behind his eyes. "I'm so tired," he whispered. "I know. I don't know how to be anything except what I was." "Then learn." "How?" Zarya stood and pulled him up with her. "One day at a time, one choice at a time. Every morning you wake up and decide who you want to be. Not who Sarah wants. Not who the families wanted. Who you want." She led him inside. They spent the day in bed, not talking, just existing together in the quiet space between trauma and healing. And slowly, so slowly Cairo almost didn't notice, the weight began to lift. Not all of it. Maybe never all of it. But enough that he could breathe again. Weeks passed. Sarah called twice more with jobs. Both times, Cairo refused. She threatened, cajoled, reminded him of his debt. He ignored all of it. "Eventually they'll come for us," Zarya said one evening. They were walking the beach, bare feet in sand, watching the sunset paint everything gold. "I know," Cairo replied. "And then what?" "Then we fight, or we run, or we find some third option I haven't thought of yet." "You really think there's a third option?" Cairo stopped walking, turned to face her. "I think," he said carefully, "that I spent my whole life believing power was the only answer, that control was safety, that love was weakness, and all of it was a lie. What's the truth?" "The truth is I'd rather die free with you than live forever as someone's weapon." Zarya smiled, sad and beautiful and impossibly brave. "Then we die free. Together?" "Together." They kissed while waves crashed around their feet, and the sun bled out across the horizon, And in that moment, Cairo understood something fundamental. He'd spent years building an empire on fear. But the only thing he'd ever truly ruled was himself. And that, choosing love over power, choosing humanity over survival, choosing to fight impossible odds for the chance to wake up beside someone who saw past the monster, that was the only throne worth dying for. Sarah came to the island one final time. It was 3 months after Cairo's refusal. 3 months of silence from the organization. 3 months that felt like holding his breath. She arrived at sunset, alone, walking up from the dock with her hands in her pockets. Cairo and Zarya met her on the terrace. "You've been ignoring our calls," Sarah said. "I've been busy," Cairo replied. "Busy doing what? Playing house? Pretending you're not who you are?" "I know exactly who I am. I'm just choosing not to be that person anymore." Sarah laughed. "You don't get to choose. That's not how this works." "Then kill me." The words hung in the air. Sarah's expression didn't change. "What?" "You heard me. I'm done. I won't work for you, won't kill for you, won't be your ghost or your weapon or whatever else you need." Cairo stepped forward. "So either kill me now or leave us alone. Those are your choices." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" They stared at each other while the ocean crashed below, and Zarya stood silent witness to the moment that would define everything. Sarah pulled out a gun. Zarya gasped. Cairo didn't move. "Last chance," Sarah said. "Work for us or die here." "Then I die here." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. Then she lowered the weapon. "You're serious," she said, almost wonderingly. "Completely." Sarah holstered the gun and shook her head. "You know what? Fine. You want out? You're out." Cairo blinked. "What?" "We don't need broken tools. If you're not willing to work, you're not worth keeping alive." She turned to leave, then paused. "But understand this. The protection we offered? Gone. The anonymity? Gone. You're on your own now. And when the families find you, and they will eventually, don't come crying to us for help." She walked away without looking back. Cairo and Zarya stood frozen on the terrace, not quite believing what had just happened. "Did she really just let us go?" Zarya whispered. "I think so." "Why?" "Because she's right. A broken tool is useless." Zarya turned to him, eyes searching his face. "Are you broken?" Cairo thought about it, thought about the empire he'd lost, the power he'd surrendered, the violence he'd left behind. Then he looked at the woman beside him, the one who'd refused to kneel, who'd seen him at his worst and stayed anyway, who taught him that strength came in forms that had nothing to do with fear. "No," he said finally. "I'm not broken. I'm just different." "Different how?" "I used to think love made men weak, that caring about someone gave them power over you. And now? Now I know love is the only thing powerful enough to change a man like me." They stood together as night fell and stars emerged one by one across the vast darkness. And for the first time in his life, Cairo Jin felt something he'd never experienced before. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, not the ambitious hope of conquest, just the quiet, steady hope that tomorrow might be better than today, that he might continue to choose right over easy, that the woman beside him might keep believing he was worth saving. Months turned into years. Sarah never came back, neither did the families. Maybe they'd truly forgotten about Cairo Jin and the foreign designer who'd loved him. Or maybe they'd decided some ghosts were better left dead. Zarya opened a new studio on the island's far side, a small space where she created clothes for no one but herself. Designs that existed purely because they were beautiful. Cairo helped when she asked. Learned to cut fabric and pin patterns. Discovered that creating something was harder and more satisfying than destroying. They built a life from nothing. Simple, quiet, normal. The kind of life Cairo had never imagined wanting. The kind of life that felt like freedom. On their first anniversary on the island, they walked the beach at sunset. "Do you ever miss it?" Zarya asked. "The power, the fear, being someone that mattered." Cairo picked up a shell and turned it over in his hands. "I miss the certainty," he admitted. "Knowing exactly who I was, what I was capable of, where I stood in the world. And now? Now I'm nobody, just a man on an island with the woman he loves. No empire, no reputation, nothing." "Nothing," Zarya repeated. "Sounds terrible." Cairo smiled. Sounds perfect. They stood at the water's edge while waves washed away their footprints and stars burned cold fire overhead. Somewhere on the mainland, Seoul continued its neon heartbeat. Crime lords fought for territory. Families schemed and murdered. The underworld churned with violence and greed. But here, on this forgotten island at the edge of the world, two people had found something rarer than power. They'd found peace. Not the peace of surrender. Not the peace of defeat. The peace of choosing something better. Of walking away from the fire and refusing to look back. Cairo had spent his life becoming feared, but Zarya had taught him something infinitely more difficult. She'd taught him how to become human. And in the end, that was the only transformation that mattered. The monster had learned to love. And in loving, had finally learned to live. Far across the water, the lights of civilization blinked like dying stars. But here, in this moment, Cairo Jin stood beside the only woman who'd ever made him want to be more than what he was. And for the first time in 34 years, the feared king of Seoul's underworld felt something he'd never dared to feel before. Contentment. Not happiness, not joy, not the manic rush of victory or the dark satisfaction of revenge, just quiet, steady contentment. The knowledge that he was exactly where he needed to be, with exactly who he needed to be with, doing exactly what he was meant to do, which was nothing, nothing except exist, nothing except love. Nothing except prove that even monsters could change if they found the right reason. The ocean whispered against the shore. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. And two people who'd survived the impossible stood together, watching the horizon, knowing that whatever came next, whether it was peace or war, safety or danger, years together or only moments, they would face it side by side. Because that's what love was. Not the absence of fear. Not the promise of safety. Just the choice to stay, again and again and again. No matter the cost, no matter the risk, no matter how many times the world tried to tear them apart. Cairo turned to Zarya and saw his entire life reflected in her eyes. Not the life he'd lived, the life he'd chosen. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For refusing to bow. For seeing past the monster. For teaching me that power isn't the only thing worth fighting for. Zarya smiled and pressed her forehead against his. Thank you for being worth saving. They stood like that while the world turned and the ocean sang its endless song. And somewhere in the darkness, their old lives burned to ash and memory. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the water and painted everything gold, they would wake up and choose each other all over again. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Because love, real love, the kind that survived bullets and betrayal and impossible odds, wasn't about possession or obsession or need. It was about choice, every single day. Choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Choosing to fight when surrender would be safer. Choosing to believe in something bigger than fear. And that simple, profound, impossibly difficult choice was the only empire Cairo Jin would ever rule again. The empire of two. Built on trust instead of terror, on hope instead of hatred, on love instead of power. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.